Griffin families, our topic this term is called Fallen Fields, which is all about the history of World War One. In history, we're going to be having a look at how the war started. We will also be having an in-depth look at the propaganda used during the war and how it might have influenced opinions or got people to join up before conscription. In geography, we will be comparing maps from what Europe would have looked like before the war started and how it looked today, now that Austria-Hungary is no longer a country. We will also be locating all the Allied, Central and Neutral powers.
In Spanish, we will have a day like half term, a whole Spanish day, where we will be focusing on identifying body parts. We will be looking at identifying clothing, objects around the room and colours. And in RE, we will be looking at Christianity and humanist views. We'll be also having big discussions about moral concepts such as fairness. And in art, we will be looking at different street art, and we'll be looking at how artists can convey a message through expressing their art in this way.
To help your children at home, we recommend that they could research more into the role that women played during the war. 'Cause obviously they didn't go do the fighting, they stayed at home. Like, what was their job? How are their roles different to what they would do now? Just so they've got that basic understanding before we go through all the history of the war.
So for English in Spring 1, we are on the last almost half terms or on the build up to SATs. We've obviously got Spring 2 and a little bit of Summer 1, but now is when we will really focus on getting ourselves ready for the tests. So it will be a lot of reading and grammar revision. So we will be looking at some reading papers. We'll be breaking them down, trying to pace ourselves through the paper and thinking about how we can really strategically answer the questions to get the most marks. Now, one of the ways within the reading paper, there will be some 3-mark questions towards the end in paper 3. Now, the papers get progressively harder. So paper 1 is usually the easier paper. Paper 2 is sort of in the middle, and then paper 3 is the hardest one. And in paper 3, there will be 3-mark questions. Now, what we have been practicing over and over with the children is thinking about how to structure your answer, so that it is built in the correct way to get all 3 marks. Now, what we suggest that they do is that they do a point, they do evidence, and then they explain. So we say to them, remember to P on your work. It usually makes them giggle, but it also helps them to remember that when they're doing their answer that they do that. So it just means making a point. So if it was saying, how was the person feeling? You would make the point, so saying that they were feeling upset. The evidence might be that they use something from the text and say, I know that they were upset because this had happened, and then they would explain it, almost inferring about the character's feelings about what that would show. So as well as that, this half term we'll be doing some grammar. One of the things we will be doing is active and passive voice. Now, there is a really catchy song that we do for grammar to help the children remember. So the saying is active voice, the subject is doing something, passive voice, something is happening to it. So all that means is that we will be thinking about something that the subject is doing. So if my sentence was, Miss Roper was cleaning the shower, Miss Roper would be doing the cleaning. So that would be an active voice. If I then flipped it to passive voice, I would be saying the shower was cleaned by Miss Roper. So we usually try and encourage the children to think about whether that would be an active or passive voice. There will be an odd few questions in the paper to do with that, but that will be something that we will be focusing on this half term.
Over the next half term, we've got a variety of aspects that we're going to be covering throughout the topic in maths. We've got percentages coming up where they're going to see the connection between the amount of percentage, what it is as a fraction, what is it as a decimal. We'll also look into working out fractions of amounts. So for instance, if I had £100 and I wanted to work out 25% of that, I'd know it'd be £25. We'd also look at percentages, increases and decreases. So as I said before, we'll see the connection with the decimals, and also within that unit of decimals, we'll be doing our addition and subtraction of decimals, so looking at place value and getting them into the right columns. Then we will have a short unit on ratio and proportion, where ratio is the sharing of the amount. So for instance, there's 4 parts in total. For instance, one's blue, 3's red. whereas proportion is the amount of the total incomplete. So for instance with this one we've got 1 out of 4 or we've got 3 out of 4 in those aspects. And then coming up towards the end of the half term we will make our way into algebra, which may lead into Spring 2, where we'll be looking at solving algebraic equations. For instance on this one we've got 3p plus 7 equals 28. We'd start off by removing 7 from both sides so that we're left with that value of a letter. So we've got 3p equals 21, and because we've got 3p, to solve that we would then divide both sides by 3 to be left with p equals 7. And the children tend to really enjoy the topic of algebra because it's that new element within the Year 6 unit.